As we get started here, I want you to write down some answers to these two questions here. So the first is to imagine that your kid, whatever the age they are now, is 25. Now, if your kid is older than 25, don't try to go back in time and imagine that way. Maybe think of grandkids. But imagine your kid that you're raising is 25 years old. That's when they say the brain is fully developed. I'm 31. I'm not quite so sure my brain's fully developed. But they say 25, you can rent a car, all that kind of stuff. So they're an adult. And so how do you want them, imagining them as an adult, as 25-year-old, there's this thing people say, I have a relationship with technology, a relationship with food. To me, that doesn't make sense. I don't have a relationship with food. It doesn't talk back to me. Not that I talk to it, but if you want to think of it that way, what do you want their relationship to technology to be? You're envisioning them as an adult, your kid. How do you want them to be using media, digital media, their devices, technology in general? That's the first question. I want you to write down a fairly specific answer to that, even if it's not lengthy. And then the second question is, how do you want your family to be described? And again, I want you to kind of go beyond generalities with this and say something specific, kind of a specific vision or mission statement or way, certain words or phrases that you want your family to embody, or how you want your family to be characterized. It's not all about what other people say about us, but that's one way to think of it. How would you want other people to describe your family and talk about your family? So those are two questions I want you to be jotting down answers to as we get settled in here. And while I'm thinking about it again, at each of my sessions, there's going to be these handouts to grab on your way out if you want. This is a one-page list of resources that I've either used in developing these lessons or would recommend reading. So books, articles, some of these from a biblical perspective, some of these from a secular perspective, some YouTube videos, some helpful resources. So I'll put these on the chair in the back, and you can grab one of these if you would like for your further research and learning. And there's that. We're talking about, it's called technology-wise homes. And so we're talking about our families and all of that. But we want to be wise. That's the first part of this. We want to be technology-wise. So for that reason, I want us to spend the first part of our session in the Scripture to think about the mindset, the framework of thinking that we should have in thinking about technology. And so I want to go to Genesis. There's a lot we learned from the book of Genesis about who we are, what we were intended to be, and our relationship with God, with each other, and with the world around us. So let's look at Genesis for the first 20 minutes or so and establish some things about our view of technology. And what we're going to do is basically paint two pictures. One is going to be what we call the Eden vision of technology, how things are intended to be, coming from Genesis chapter 1 and 2. And then we'll fast forward and talk about the Babylon vision of technology from Genesis chapter 11 and the Tower of Babel. Much more we could say about all this, but we'll just do a quick a skim of this as we kind of set up our discussion of our homes and our families this morning. Okay, so Genesis chapter 1, the work of God in creation is to bring order to chaos, right? So the first 3 days of creation, He puts everything in its proper place. He separates the light from the dark. He separates the waters above from the waters below, gathers the dry land into one place. And then in days 4, 5, and 6, He fills that ordered world with life, right? So sun, moon, and stars, the heavenly bodies, the fish and the birds on day 5, and then the man and beast on day 6. But of course, man is made differently and with a special purpose. So we would read in Genesis 1:26, then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So verse 27, God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him, male and female. He created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So a couple things we'll point out here. One, man and woman are made in God's image. There's a lot that means, but at least part of that is that we have these abilities emotional capacity, mental capacity, even intellectual abilities that make us different from the animals and make us more like God. But the second thing we'll notice is that here in Genesis 1, God charges man's purpose from the beginning is to rule over creation, to subdue creation, to have dominion, it says. This is royal language. Even the image of God language is language of royalty, of man and woman being kings and queens, we might say, okay? Ruling and having dominion over creation, always under the authority of God as the ultimate authority. But with God, under God, serving as rulers, as benevolent kings over creation that was in their charge. So that's the picture of Genesis chapter 1. You come to Genesis chapter 2, there's a little more detailed account of creation and man's role in it. Notice a few verses, Genesis 2 and verse 5. Says that now no shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted, for the Lord God had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. Okay, that seems to indicate that the growth on the earth, the vegetative growth on the earth, was dependent on man being there to cultivate it and to work on the land. You see that there? Before that, and obviously God was needed. He sent the rains, but also man was needed to cultivate the ground. It goes on to say in verse 7 of Genesis 2, the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living being. The Lord God planted a garden towards the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God caused to grow every tree that is pleasing to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This seems to say that you see that Eden was a place on the earth. Okay, it was to the east. East of what? But it was to the east, and Eden was a place. Within Eden, there was a garden. And so there's a sense here that there is an expansion that's going to take place. The text also describes rivers that go out. So it could be that what's being envisioned here, remember, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, that there was the garden in Eden, and that was supposed to grow outward and fill the whole earth with the glory of God. Okay. Some of that may be a little bit speculative, but we can be firmer in our understanding as we get down to chapter 2 and verse 15, where man's task is explicitly stated. Genesis 2:15, and this is crucial even for our discussion in our homes and families. The Lord God took man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, from any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for the day that you eat it you will surely die. Man's job was to cultivate and to keep. Those are two words that have two different meanings. One, to cultivate is to work or to serve. I'm going to call this our productive purpose, to cultivate, to bring forth fruit. The second, to keep, means to guard or to protect. So call it our protective purpose. These are the two purposes man had from the beginning: to cultivate, to produce, and to protect, to guard, to keep. And so I want to ask you, just kind of play this out in your mind, what would this have looked like, do you think? If you kind of play it forward in a different scenario where there wasn't the sin in the garden and this continued on for a while, what would it have looked like for man to fulfill their role, to multiply, to fill the earth, to subdue it, to rule over fish and birds and beasts, to cultivate, even to expand a garden, and to receive every plant and fruit as food? What would it look like to protect that garden from potential threats or dangers? So if you're playing that out in your mind, you might also ask, what do you think it would have required for man to maybe invent, to come up with, things that man had to build or to create, to engineer, in order to fulfill, to carry out this task? So I think from Genesis 1 and 2, what we would say is that God did intend man to use the abilities that he was blessed with, made in God's image, with these intellectual, these rational abilities, these creative abilities that we know we are endowed with, that the animals are not. God intended, we would say, man to build, to create, to invent, even to use technology. Why? to rule creation, to cultivate it, to protect it, and to spread the glory of God to all the earth. Okay, but how does it really go? It doesn't go very well. Okay, humans rebel against God. They take the mastery for themselves. What Genesis 3 is really, I think, about is that in breaking that commandment of eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they are saying, God, we know what's good. We're going to do things our way. We're going to run our lives and reject your authority. And of course, the consequences are catastrophic. Man's relationship with God is shattered or broken, and they are kicked out of the garden. Man's relationship with creation is, now there's thorns and thistles. That relationship is now broken. Man and woman are, distant from each other. Distrust, blame, human relationships are broken. And now all humans suffer the same fate, which is death, as a consequence of this sin. And so they go out. If you look at Genesis 3, verse 23, it says that they went out of the garden to cultivate the ground. And what that tells us is that even though the world is now broken, man still retains his purpose for which he was created. It is still the purpose of man. And man is still made in the image of God. It's still our purpose to reflect God's image, to fill the earth with God's glory, to cultivate, to keep. Even though now we're doing that in a world that is harsh and broken and oftentimes working against us. And so this story plays out. We have the sin of Cain killing his brother. We have Cain rebelling against God. He's told to be a vagrant and a wanderer, and he says, I'm going to build a city and name it after my son. So he's rebelling that way. The line of Cain is actually where we see the developments of the first technologies in human history: musical instruments, animal husbandry, metallurgy. And we don't know for sure, but I think we can assume from Cain's line and the character of the people we know that come from Cain's line, that these technologies were put to a selfish, a self-serving, maybe even wicked or oppressive, violent use. But that all comes from the line of Cain, and the world falls apart until in the days of Noah, of course, God decides to destroy the earth and start over. But even from there, Noah and his son start over the cycle of sin. And that leads us then to Genesis chapter 11, in many ways the culmination of the sin and the rebellion in early human history. And so let's read from Genesis chapter 11. We've established the Eden view, right? Humans made in the image of God, humans to cultivate, to keep, to fill the earth with God's glory, and even to apply their ingenuity, their engineering, and technology to that ultimate purpose. But let's see what Genesis chapter 11 shows us about a different view of technology that's present in Babylon. Genesis 11 verse 1, now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. And it came about as they journeyed east, that's away from God in the Genesis text, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they used brick for stone and they used tar for mortar. They said, come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. And let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. Wouldn't want that, right? The Lord came down, verse 5, to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people. They have all the same language. And this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. And so the Lord scattered them abroad and from there over the face of the whole earth. And they stopped building the city. And therefore its name was called Babel or Babylon, because the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. Okay, so this story begins with the development of a new technology. And this is actually a big deal, right? So before they could make bricks for building, I'm assuming they just used stone. Stone is a hard, thing to build with because you got to find the stones naturally that are the right shape and size for your building project, or, do the hard work of cutting them down to work. But with bricks, man, you can make these nice, uniform, building materials, and it's quick, and you just got to, get the clay and then get the tar to put them together. So, man, now with this new technology, so much more is possible in terms of building. And so what do they do with this fantastic new technology? Well, even when they say we're going to build a city, that's kind of our first red flag, because remember, Cain's building of a city back in chapter 4 was not so great a thing. But notice some of the things that are said about it. First, it says that they're going to have a tower that reaches to the top, and its top reaches to heaven. We remember this from telling our kids this story. This is the ambition, the false pride, right? We're going to supplant God. It could even be false worship, some form of pagan worship, like a ziggurat or something, okay? But they say, let us make a name for ourselves. And this in some ways is more important. To make a name for yourself is to define who you are. Didn't Ben talk about that last night? Okay. Your name is your identity, and they're going to define their identity for themselves. This is supposed to, I think, be contrasted in the next chapter in Genesis 12, where God tells Abraham, I will make for you a great name. God is going to establish Abraham's identity and shape his destiny. At Babylon, they say, we're going to shape our own destiny. We're going to run the show. So you see the ego, you see the pride, and they say, let us, we do this, lest we be scattered and fill the whole earth. What had God told man from the beginning they were supposed to do? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. They say, no, we got to stay in one place. So they're rebelling against the commands of God as well. Now, all this, of course, is laughable to God. God has to come down even to see it. What's going on down there? You know? So he sees their project, and he doesn't just see it as folly, but he sees it as a serious evil that has to be confronted. He says this is just the beginning. He sees this as the start of the rebellion that will only get worse and worse if humans are left to their own devices. And he says nothing they purpose will be impossible. I think what this means is that they're purposing evil. And humans left alone, they will devise and carry out wickedness and oppression and violence beyond imagination, okay? Maybe we can kind of start to imagine that if you imagine what this is. This is all of humanity crammed into one big metropolis of a city. How do you think that would go? Not good. I think that's what God is seeing the horrible outcome of this and actually saving humanity from it by scattering the people all over the earth with different languages. Okay? So he does that. In spite of their rebellion, he still accomplishes his purposes by scattering them over the earth. But this becomes the biblical city of Babylon. And this begins a theme and an image that shows up over and over again with the story of the Israelites and then even into the New Testament and the book of Revelation. The city of Babylon is the city of human rebellion, the city that charms the whole earth, seduces them with her sorcery. And this is the city that God's people are called to come out of in the book of Revelation, lest you become corrupted by her. Okay, so to just summarize, what is the vision of technology and human ingenuity that comes out of Babylon? This is it. We as humans, we are intelligent, we are capable. We can and we will build and invent whatever we like in order to overcome our limitations and make a name for ourselves, create the world that we want and that we deem best, to make heaven on earth through our unlimited capacity for technology and for invention. And in particular, I want us to notice that in Babylon and going forward, and to today, if you haven't guessed, we're living in the modern Babylon, especially in terms of technology. Humans are attempting to overcome the limitations that have been placed on us by our sin through the development of human technology. So we said from the garden, the result of sin, broken human relationships, okay? So we're mitigating that through the technology of internet and social media. Have you just seen these commercials, you know, where they got the phone? I don't actually have mine on me. I guess that's a good thing, right, for these sessions. And, you know, there's two people, you know, that's in total different languages, right? And they're using a phone in between them, and they're just speaking, and Google Translate is breaking down that barrier, the barrier placed at Babylon, the brokenness of relationship. That's one example, the broken relationships, but through technology, we can bring everybody together. That's the promise of social media we talked about earlier. Bring everybody together through the internet, the modern Tower of Babel. Our relationship with creation was broken because of sin. Thorns and thistles. But now we have pesticides, and now we have modern automated farming. okay? And we've taken all the toil out of farming. Now, every time I say that in these lessons, I got to say, I know even still today, farming is way harder than I know, and I could never do it, okay? But it's much easier than it used to be because we have machines and we have technology that's made that so fruitful that we have actually too much food, at least in our world, in our society. So much food we had to create a different technology, refrigerators, to store all the food that's left over, okay? But we've solved the broken world thing through technology. And even death. Your Apple Watch will tell you when you're about to have a heart attack. And there's going to just be continual, more treatments, more medicines, more surgeries to keep us alive, right? As long as possible. We've conquering death with technology. This is the vision of Babylon. We're going to overcome our limitations through our own means, okay? But the question I would ask you is, how's that going? How's that working out for us? Okay? Yeah, we're more connected to other people via the internet and social media than we've ever been before. Are we closer to people? Do we have deeper relationships with people because of that? We have access to more information than ever before. A friend of mine is still a dumb phone user, and we had this joke because I had a smartphone, and we'd be talking about something. It's like, do you remember the answer to this question? It's like, if I had a machine, if I had a machine in my pocket that could answer any question I had, we have access to more information than ever before. Are we smarter people? Are we wiser? Can we even find our own way to the grocery store without getting lost on our own? We have, through technology, comfort, entertainment, and abundance. Whatever entertainment you want at your fingertips. Are we happier people? We live longer. We face less pain, generally speaking. We have more options for medical treatments. Are we less afraid of death now as a people than in the past? No. I think what we would see is that the Babylon project, for all of its promise, brings what it brought in Genesis 11. Okay? More pain and more brokenness. And the promise of the gospel, before we go any further, of course, is that those problems have been solved in Jesus. That man and God have been brought together. Through the church, people are brought together. And there's a promise of even creation itself being redeemed and for us to conquer death through the resurrection of Jesus and our own resurrection. So we don't need Babylon to solve our problems. These problems have been solved. But the question is, as we transition to talking about our own homes and our families, jumping off of Babylon here, the question is, have we been seduced by this modern vision of technology and of media, this Babylon view? Are our homes simply a reflection of this modern Babylon? Okay, so a few questions for you to reflect on here. One of the principles of Babylon in terms of technology is, if I can do it, I will do it. This is the great line out of Jurassic Park, right? When Dr. Ian Malcolm says, you were so busy thinking if you could do it, you didn't stop to think if you should do it, right? But in Babylon, those two things are synonymous. If I can do it, then that itself is the justification. Okay? Have we bought into that in our own homes? That just because it's possible, because it's available, because it's affordable, does that mean that we should do it, that we should get it, that we should adopt it in our homes? So for instance, just for instances here, I can get my kids the newest iPhone, but should I? I can set up one-click ordering on my Amazon app. Should I do that? I can wear a watch that buzzes every time I get a text message or a Facebook message or any kind of email notification. Should I do that? Have that? I can get a robot to vacuum my house for me. Should I do that? He's my uncle, so I'll give him a pass, The point here is that the answer to these questions is, I'm not saying the answer to these questions is automatically no. What I am saying is that the answer to these questions is not automatically yes. We have to think about these things and apply some wisdom to these decisions. Okay, so have we fallen into that Babylon trap? If I can get it, I'll get it. Second question I would ask is, our technology isolating us from one another? Have we fallen prey to the same deception of the world, that tech's going to bring us closer together? when in fact it's really doing the opposite. This is really fascinating. I think it's in the 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You book. He goes through the development of music technology and shows that actually as music technology has advanced, it's meant more and more isolation from other people. So in the past, it was like music was played in the town square. Everybody would come out to hear it, right? Then it was, what is it called? The phonograph or something, in your home, but everyone's got to be in the same room to listen to it, okay? And now we've moved towards what? Earbuds. Everybody listening to their own little thing. He says the same thing about heating. It used to be in the same room where the fire was or where the furnace was. Now central heating, all be in your own room and stay warm, okay? There's something to that. The development of technology has just led to further isolations. Is that what it looks like in our home or in our family? We're all at the restaurant together, but everybody's on a device at the table. Or we're all at home, but everyone's in their own room on their own screen. So is technology isolating us? And the third question about are we reflecting Babylon in our homes is personal pleasure the end goal of our technology use? Again, for Babel, it was this is what I want to do. And technology makes it possible for me to do that. Is that what my habits look like? Video games I play, the TV, it's just what I want to do. I'm going to do it, okay? I'm going to play video games. It doesn't matter that I'm a husband of a wife and a father of 4 kids, it's like I'm going to play my video games, Or TV, I watch TV as what I want to do. And the same with my kids. What they want, that's what they're going to do. They want it, we'll get it. Are we trying in our own homes to create some sort of technological utopia just so we can live a life of ease and enjoyment and pleasure? Okay. I was 3 minutes ahead of schedule at this point in the previous class. Now I'm 3 minutes behind schedule. So let's get a move on here. All right, so we want to resist the Babylon vision, but let's use the Eden model to talk about our homes and our families. So a few things to work through here as we talk about fulfilling our responsibilities. And the first is that we need to have a vision for our homes and for our families. Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people cast off restraint. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Now the proverb is likely referring to the prophetic vision, the oracle from God. When there's no prophetic vision, then the people cast off restraint. I think it applies to vision in general. And of course, our vision needs to be shaped by the revelation of God, of course. But with no view of where we're going, we wander aimlessly. We're bound to no direction, okay? And so, if we don't have a vision in our homes and our families, particularly when it comes to the use of technology and media, we're just going to adopt, as we've said, adopt the view of the world. We're just going to go along with the flow, the way that everyone else uses technology, because we have no vision. So, let's establish a vision. On a large scale, what we've been talking about is our vision. I think Eden, the view of humans in Genesis 1 and 2, that is, on a large scale, our vision for who we are. We are humans made in the image of God. We are masters over creation, to rule over creation instead of the other way around. And our job is to cultivate fruitfulness in the earth to the glory of God. Our job is to protect myself and my family. That's who I am. That's what it means to be human. That's a vision established in Genesis 1 and 2 that we need to adopt for ourselves. But on a small scale, we also need to have vision for our family. So hopefully you answered these questions. You wrote them down on a piece of paper. What you've written down is, in essence, a vision for your family. So your kid, you're envisioning them, you're seeing them as a 25-year-old adult. What do you want them to do? Real quickly, shout out some of the things, if you want. Shout out some of the things you wrote down. Learning. Okay. Tool. Serve the Lord. Influence others for good. Keep in touch with family. Fun, you said? And then what about the second question? How do you want your family to be described? What are some of the words you came up with, phrases? Spiritual. Loyal. Close. Kind. What was this? Rich in Christ. Okay. So what I love about all of this, you guys are making my point for me. So glad about that. Whether it's a specific child you have a vision for or your family in general, all of these things really, our vision is about character, right? It's about the kind of people we want our children to become. It's about the kind of family that we want to have. And so this is our vision. Our vision is the development of godly character in our children to the service of the kingdom and the glory of God. That's the vision we need to have for our kids and for our family. And that vision then dictates everything else. So back to Proverbs 29:18. Where there is no vision, he says, the people cast off restraint. Okay, so we talked about vision. The next thing we want to talk about is boundaries. Boundaries or limits or restrictions. And you see the connection there in the proverb. Okay, with no vision, there's no boundaries. With no vision, there's no constraint or no restraint. Okay, and so there's a wandering aimlessly. It's just anything goes. Okay, so what's the reverse of that? With vision, what is there? There's restraint. There's boundaries. There's limits. And that's direction. Direction is limiting by nature. And so with a vision that we've established of what we want for our children and what we want for our families, we impose restraints. This goes back to the garden language. One of the two tasks of man and woman from the beginning was to protect, to build walls, we might say, to keep, to guard. That is our job as well. With these 2 points together, with vision and boundaries together, I love the story of the Rechabites in Jeremiah 35. Go read it, look at it later. But God wanted to make a certain point to Jeremiah in the downfall of Judah, his last days. Nothing good seems to be going on in Judah. But Jeremiah goes and is told by God to go interview the Rechabites, to ask them to sit down and drink wine with him. And this is what they say. They say, "We will drink no wine. For Jonadab, the son of Rechab, our father, commanded us, you shall not drink wine, neither you nor your sons forever. You shall not build a house, you shall not sow seed, you shall not plant or have a vineyard. You shall live in tents all your days, that you may live many days in the land that you sojourn. And we have obeyed the voice of Jonadab, the son of Rechab, our father, in all that he commanded us, to drink no wine, to not build houses, to have no vineyard, and to live in tents. We've obeyed and done all that Jonadab, our father, commanded us." What I want to highlight, the Rechabites had all these things that their father told them to do. These were not commands of God. God never said, don't build houses, don't plant vineyards, only live in tents, this kind of thing. You look more into this, the text, they were of a certain clan. They were the Kenites, and they had a certain identity of living in tents. Jael was a Kenite who nailed the tent peg into Sisera's forehead, living in tents. They'd always done that. That was part of their identity. And they had this family mission statement, right? This family vision of this is who we are, right? That went, that included things that you say, well, God never commanded that. But they said, no, this is who we are as a family. This is our vision for ourselves. And God was actually wishing that the people of Judah would show the same sort of commitment to their identity as the people of God. But here's the point. We have a vision for who we want, what our family to look like, who we want our kids to be. This vision of cultivating spiritual fruitfulness in the garden mindset. And in order to cultivate fruitfulness, you have to set restrictions. The vision imposes restraints. Limits is what we're talking about, or boundaries. So a couple types of boundaries that we'll mention here. One is boundaries of space, like physical space, that is off limits or on limits. Okay, I would say this, decide where it is in your home you want your tech to be and keep it there. So think of like a media room, and this is where we go, we're on our devices, okay? This is where we do the movies, where we do the gaming, if we do that, okay? And it's going to stay there. It's not going to, infiltrate the rest of our house and just be spread out everywhere. There's devices in every room, screens in every room. We're going to limit it. It's going to be space limited. And when we do that as a family, that's where we go to do that. I will say that there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of things to think through here. It's hard to raise kids, isn't it? There is wisdom, I would say, in keeping, if there's a family computer that has access to the internet, having that in a public space, a place where there's traffic, where you can always kind of monitor what's going on. Because there's that to keep in mind too. I mentioned in the previous session that the tech executives in Silicon Valley are all over this way before us. they don't let their kids, use these devices the same way that we let our kids use, because they know the dangers. But one of the things that's universal across the board with these tech executives, they all say no phones in the bedroom for their kids. Okay? And that kind of physical space boundary, I think, is important. Okay? Other spaces, though, you may want to say are, off limits. The dinner table, no phones. These are suggestions, by the way. You don't have to do all the things I'm telling you to do. Okay? These are suggestions. We need boundaries. You decide where those boundaries need to be. Maybe you say no devices at worship or when you go to Bible class. But boundaries of space. The other boundary would be boundaries of time, of course. Time limits on devices. That's always been true. Us growing up in the old days, when all we had was TV and internet, time limits for each device or for each game or whatever it is. Okay, I really like this one for families and for personal. We'll talk about it or mention it again in the next session. A time at night when all the devices power down. Okay, so say whatever it is, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Phones are in a basket. Okay, we know where they go. Devices are turned off. Those power down and go to sleep. And then we have this winding down time for ourselves and for our family. Okay, and we go to sleep, we rest. Maybe you actually get an old-fashioned alarm clock. They still have them. Actually, Amazon sells alarm clocks. Don't have to use your phone and pick it up, because then there's also another wake-up time, right? And the devices don't get up immediately when we get up. They stay where they are, their station, until whatever 7 a.m., 8 a.m., whatever you decide. Okay. Whatever boundaries you want to decide. But a quick comment or 3 comments on these boundaries. One is that these boundaries, they will inevitably, easy for me to say, be radically different from other people and other families. Okay, you're just gonna have to accept being weird. It's one of the things I like about the Rechabites. They're like, yeah, we're the Rechabites, deal with it. It's like, we're weird, okay? We're the people of God, we're weird. Now what's hard is that it often means we're going to be radically different and weird from other folks at church. That's where the struggle really takes place. So I can just implore each of you with your own families, don't be the person, right? Don't be the family that makes other families make these difficult decisions, because there's no boundaries in your home for tech, and so other parents are nervous about kids being at your house overnight or something. Okay. But what it really means is that we need to be working together on this. Families need to be working together. Older families need to be encouraging and instructing younger families. Do this together, not only in our homes, but in our congregations. Let's be weird together and establish these boundaries. So we have a vision for ourselves. The vision then means we impose boundaries, restrictions. But remember that the boundaries are put in place to achieve the ultimate vision. Okay? There probably is some danger at some point of boundaries without purpose, boundaries without reason. Okay? Now, even arbitrary boundaries sometimes are helpful just for kids to learn. Guess what? You don't always get what you want, or sometimes you just turn it off. Okay? But ultimately, the boundaries are about getting us to the vision. And the vision, we've already established, the vision is one of character. I'll use the word virtue. That's the third thing we want to talk about here. So we have a vision, we have boundaries, and the goal is virtue. Virtue, character. In particular, we want our kids to have self-control. And to be able to, at 25, have enough self-control to be independent. Guess what? At 25, you're not going to be able to set restrictions on their time usage, right? They're going to have to do that for themselves. I know, the tracking thing on the phone where people are. Ashlyn, are your parents still doing that? They know where you are. You're on the phone? Yeah. Okay. Surely you're not already 25, are you?
Not yet.
Okay. Whew, that would make me feel really old, yeah, so you're not going to be able to monitor and restrict them. They're going to be on their own. What are they going to need in order to be responsible? They're going to need self-control, okay? To be able to use these things independently is the point. Proverbs 16:32, whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty. And whoever, sorry, I lost my place here. So whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty. He who rules his spirit is stronger or better than he who takes a city. And man, ruling your spirit, having self-control. When it comes to screens and tech and media, ruling your spirit, that's city-conquering stuff, man. If you can have self-control rule your spirit and pertains to media, that's huge. My brother would tell me that if a kid has self-discipline, man, that goes such a long way to solve so many other problems and to put them on the right path, especially in their spiritual development, their development of virtue. So, our kids are going to be totally independent and free at some point. How are they going to handle that? How can we get them ready for that? Notice a passage in Hebrews 12, verses 7 to 11. Think about how this might apply to this, developing of independence and self-control in our kids. Speaking of this spiritual maturity of the Hebrew Christians and how God treats them as a father, Paul gave it away what my theory is on Hebrews. No, I'm just kidding. He says, it is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which you have all participated, you're illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers, he says, who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. That's the outcome. That's the vision. In the moment, all discipline, all boundaries, all restrictions seem painful rather than pleasant. But later, it yields the vision, the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So we put our kids through the painful discipline now, for the moment, to create the peaceful fruit of to cultivate, the peaceful fruit of righteousness of their godly character and their independent self-discipline when they're older. I've heard people talk about this kind of thing. Say, well, kids are going to be independent. They're going to be out on their own. Using that as like a reason to put less restrictions. Say, well, they got to figure it out, so just let them, do whatever they want because they're going to be on their own one day, I think it's actually the opposite. Using the Hebrews 12 principle. For the moment, it's painful. There are difficult restrictions. But from there, we would say that it should be a slow, gradual road towards tech independence. So a couple references. You can look at more into these on the resource list. There's a lady named Dr. Kimberly Young, who was one of the first people to write and work on internet screen addiction. This was her guidelines for kids. Not a believer, just her guidelines for kids. 0 to 3, no, never, nowhere in terms of screens. 3 to 6, 1 hour a day for developmental purposes. 6 to 9, 2 hours a day, family bonding, right, doing it together. 9 to 12, 2 hours a day, kind of introducing them to the internet. 12 to 18, letting them use it and monitoring and instructing them along the way. In the TechWise Family book by Andy Crouch, he says no screens before 10. And I think he means kind of like let them be on their own screen. But you can read the book and remind me, because I forgot from reading the book earlier. Again, I'm not saying follow these rules. I'm saying this is what we need to think about. The slow, gradual move towards independence with strict guidelines and coaching, and then working towards the point where they're going to be out on their own. All right, I have 30 seconds for the last point here. Okay. All right. The last thing I wanted to talk about is mess. This can be a quick point. I love this proverb. Okay, so we've talked about vision, establishing a vision for our families. We talked about setting boundaries. We talked about the goal of virtue, self-control when they become independent. But mess. I love this proverb, Proverb 14:4. Where there are no oxen, the manger is clean. Isn't that great? Yeah. But abundant crops come by the strength of an ox. Having an ox is messy. You got to clean up after it. Okay. But with that ox, you get a lot of work done. It's very productive, okay? So, homes that are filled with tons of tech and media, they're very easy and clean and convenient, right? Kids are pacified. I'm not a slave to technology. Just because a bell rings, I'm not going to, just bear with me a few more minutes here. Thank you for your attention. So, kids are pacified, right? They're on their iPads, phones, computers, and their video games, okay? Everyone's got their own screen. There's no fighting. There's no arguing. We order dinner through Uber Eats. There's no cooking. There's no cleaning up, right? Friends don't come over, right? When other friends come over, everyone's still on their device. It's really nice and calm and peaceful, okay? And then contrast that with doing fruitful things together as a family, okay? Playing a board game as a family. Man, what greater opportunity for fighting and arguing. Am I right? You fight, you argue, you get mad at each other, right? Playing a family board game. What fun, what memories, you know. Each kid has to do chores each day. They're complaining about it. They don't do a very good job, right? They don't vacuum the floor as good as the robot does, you know. So, you know, the house stays messy because the kids do their chores, but nothing's really ever clean, right? We take a family camping trip together. Man, is that complicated and exhausting, you know, and painful. Right? The family devotional or Bible reading time, but you got to wrangle all the kids together. They don't sit still. You know, they're not listening. They're falling asleep. You know, cooking a meal, letting the kids help, especially. Man, that's messy. Without an ox, the manger is nice and clean. With the ox, there's productivity and fruitfulness. The second list of what we talked about, that's where the fruitful moments of a family are cultivated. That's where the memories are made, but more importantly, that's where the spiritual character is developed. It's in those messy moments of living real life together. And our homes need to be places where we work and play and learn and rest together. And it may be harder and messier, and there may be resistance, especially if we're making big changes in the middle of things, okay? And the kids are a little bit older, there's going to be resistance. But it's worth it. Because our homes need to be little gardens of Eden, right? In which we have in our homes, in our family, a haven, a protected, fruitful haven away from the shallow, distracted, selfish world that we live in. And instead, fruitful gardens where real life is lived and shared together. So, cast a vision, what you want your family to be. Make your technology limits and commitments accordingly. Progress your kids towards self-disciplined independence and live your lives together as families. Cool. Thank you guys so much. This was fun.